In this game, players are going to be running their own caravans, working independently of each other, but also competitively against each other in order to be the first to make it from the left-hand side of the board all the way to the right-hand side. There's going to be different terrain that you're going to be navigating through, different items you can pick up along the way, but of course there will also be different threats. And the main threat in this game does come in the form of something known as Ember Zombies. And these aren't exactly your typical zombies because these bodies have actually been reanimated by the fire fairies that happen to inhabit this part of the land. In order to set up the main board, players are going to be randomly placing 4 different map tiles into the center of the table within reach of all players, and each of these tiles is going to be broken into a bunch of different spaces that players are going to be navigating through, but of course the players are going to be starting on the leftmost column on that leftmost tile. Players will each choose a space to place their meatball, and that's going to be representing their caravan over the course of the game. But in order to play this game, players are going to be playing actions primarily through dice worker placement. At the start of each round, players are going to be simultaneously rolling their 5 dice, and then on your board you're going to have a whole bunch of different options to place your dice, and you can also gain cards throughout the game as you add more characters onto your caravan, and those will also come with their own dice worker placement spots as well, offering you more options and combinations each and every round. But the way that the dice placement works here is that there is a value located on your board or your card, and the value there represents the lowest value die that can be placed there in order to activate that action. This means that your higher value dice are more valuable and it still can be used there to perform that action. But of course, there are some spaces that use multiple dice, and you do need a single die in each of those spaces, higher than the value shown for each of those, but you do need all of those dice in order to perform that action. These actions can allow you to do all sorts of different things like gain additional cards into your hand, gain different resources like food, goods, or money, which are the 3 primary resources in the game, and you'll be spending those in order to activate your cards, putting them into your tableau, or to perform other actions that are offered in the game. But there is also an action to attack any zombies within your space or to trade goods or gold at the market. And I'll come back to both of those in a second here, because the last action I want to talk about is, of course, the movement action. And there's a whole bunch of different terrain, and moving through different terrain can be more difficult than others. And this is shown at the top of your board, where you just need a single die of 3 or more to move through an empty plane. But to move through any terrain, you need a combination of 3 dice. But getting back to when a player decides to use the trade action, that's actually going to allow them to trade in either any amount of gold or any amount of goods in order to put one of their tokens at the top of either of these tracks. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different columns here, each with a different cost as well as a different amount of victory points that they reward. And the reason that there's so many of these is because each column can only be done maximum once per person. But once a person decides to trade in an amount of gold or an amount of goods in order to put one of their cubes up on one of these columns, they're actually going to be starting a timer that limits the amount of time that the other players have in order to also complete that column. Because once a cube is added to the topmost row of one of these columns, it's going to be moving down 1 notch every round, and once it reaches that bottom location, no other player can do that for the rest of the game. But as you can see, these aren't the only tracks here, because we do also have the zombie track on the left here, but this one does work a little bit differently, because the only way to get onto this track is by fighting zombies, and the only way to fight zombies is by finding them on the main board. Anytime that you move your caravan into one of these locations that have this little skull and crossbones, that's going to be allowing you to fight a zombie, but it is not required. The catch here is that anytime you move into one of these spaces, you will be taking damage, and the only way to heal damage is by fighting zombies. But like I said, you don't have to fight the zombies, but you will be carrying that damage with you until you heal it by fighting zombies later. And the attack action is the only action spot that doesn't have a minimum specific value associated with it. And the reason for that is because you can place whatever value die you want there, but the value that you put there is going to dictate the amount of damage that you do. So if you put a 6 there, that's going to be dealing 6 damage. And of course, this is going to dictate where you get to put your cube on that zombie board. So higher damage is more difficult to attain, which means if you're able to get your cube up there sooner than others, you might be completely blocking off that option to the other players in the future. But the cool thing about the attack action is that if you do gain other characters into your caravan by gaining those cards and then playing them into your tableau, you can actually stack those together to increase your total damage, which will then make it easier for you to get higher up on this board. And like I said, there are actions to draw more of these cards into your hand, but in order to add them to your tableau, you do have to pay the cost, which is going to be located on the top left corner of those cards. And you just go ahead and pay those if you have the resources to do so, and that's going to be adding more actions into your tableau. And once you've added that card into your tableau, not only do you gain access to its unique worker placement location, but you'll also be able to unlock its victory point scoring potential. And a lot of these cards also come with unique effects and abilities that are only specific to that card. But as players are moving across the board, they can also find some other icons that are a little bit more helpful than the zombies, and these are the treasure chest icons as well as the fruit icons. The treasure chest icons can grant you different bonuses and victory point potential at the end of the game, while the fruit allow you to modify your dice rolls on your turn to try and re-roll certain dice in order to try and get the combinations that you're looking for. At the end of a player's turn, they also get to put a tent token in the location that they ended their turn on, and each of these are going to be worth a victory point at the end of the game, but you can only put a tent token there if you don't already have one, which is going to incentivize each player to always be moving forward. I personally think this game looks like a ton of fun. I think it's making a lot of really good design decisions. I really like the way those different tracks work, and I really do like dice worker placement, and I especially like that you can add new cards into your tableau, creating new worker locations for you to place those dice. I'm also a big fan of games that are easy to teach and play, and I think this checks off both those boxes, especially with the simultaneous dice rolling and worker placement, because this is going to allow you to play with any number of players without adding on to that game length in a significant way. I get a ton of flack in the comment section because as I go through all these games, a lot of you end up discovering new games that you had no idea about before that you end up becoming very interested in, which ends up costing you a bit from your bank account. But I just want all of you to know that I am no exception to this. Going through all of these games each and every week, there are always games that I discover that end up wanting to take my money, and this is definitely one of them. This one surprised me, and it is a game that I do want to add to my own personal collection, so I'm going to be following this one with the intention of backing it. But of course, it will also depend on the price point because I am on a limited budget here. But if this one looks interesting to you, you can check it out in the description below. But if that one didn't interest you, you might still want to check it out because there are quite a few other games offered in this campaign as well, because they're also going to be introducing a brand new RPG, which is going to be taking you into the world of Arzium, which is featured in a lot of their previous games. So you're going to be seeing a lot of the same faces and locations that you've seen in previous games, and you can also use some of the components from those previous games to augment the RPG experience. Of course, this also features that same excellent artwork by Ryan Lockett himself, and in this game, players are going to have a 5-stat system, which is going to offer you other ways to deal with enemies other than just combat. But the whole story behind this adventure is that players are going to be trying to uncover a worldwide mystery as they fly their airship across the world, visiting these various locations and even discovering some new ones. Everything's included that you need to play the game, but like I said, you can include components from the other games if you do own them, which are not necessary, but you can include them if you like. This campaign is also going to be introducing a new version of Islebound known as the Emerald Edition, which is going to be introducing a new resource, but it's also going to be changing up some of the rules and completely revamping some of the decks. And this is a game that's been out for a while now, so if it's a game you already know you like, this might be a good opportunity to jump in on it. But if you do want to learn more, there are a ton of reviews and playthroughs over on YouTube, and you can just find those for yourself. But there are going to be a few other hard-to-find Arzium products, including Rome and Near and Far, which are going to be available in this campaign as well. So if you're interested in any of that, I do have the links down below, and you can click to get notified.